Welcome to iBridged Leadership Stories. Today, my guest has spent over 15 years as a human resources professional, creating and driving strategic people initiatives leading to organizational successes. With a focus on the employee experience, employee engagement, and operations, she has successfully led people strategies in companies experiencing growth from that small startup of 5 to over 500 people. That's a pretty phenomenal growth rate. She's known for delivering the tools and programs that lead to high-performing organizations and teams and people. Her guiding principle and operational focus is, check this out, to drive employee engagement while increasing their excitement and their connection to work and to their coworkers and connecting them to fun. I love that. I love everything about that. She ultimately wants to create a deep sense of connectedness to the organization. Please join me in welcoming Lauren Burris.
Hello. Hi.
Lauren, how are you?
I'm doing really well. I am excited to be here and talking about engagement. Yeah, I love it.
Welcome, welcome. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. This idea of driving connectedness, which sounds an awful lot like belonging in an organization, is one of the sweet spots for iBridge. And so I'm super excited to have this conversation. Welcome. Now, Lauren, you're the director of engagement and development at Certinia, which is a 1,000-person SaaS company here in the Silicon Valley. Previously, you were at Glue, which was acquired by Electronic Arts while you were there. And at Certinia, the director of engagement is an awful lot like head of learning and development. Is that right?
Yeah, I say it's probably a expanded scope of learning and development.
And you've had a really big year this year. Some major initiatives. I'm super excited to hear about them in more detail. Do you want to tell me a little bit more sort of high level about that?
Yeah, so I would say that the last year has been kind of a wild ride, to be honest. We've had some organizational changes at the beginning of this year. And so our focus this year was really around driving, as you've been talking about, connectedness, employee engagement, communication, belonging, all of that to help serve to drive motivation and productivity within our team and get to know our newer executive team to the organization. So it was a lot of new programs that were put in place.
You mentioned newer executive teams. So Certinia, formerly known as Financial Force, went through an ownership change, and that was how long ago?
Just about a little over a year now, maybe almost a year and a half.
Okay. So our conversation today will sort of be shadowed by the fact that there was a major change in leadership in the organization. I think there was also a major change in the strategic direction of the organization. Financial Force was on a track for IPO. This ownership change, I think, is changing the strategic direction in more of that PE-based operation. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of focus on the employees that are learning to kind of develop their skills within house and really that internal growth and development as opposed to kind of that next step of a large organization going public. Yeah.
I can't even imagine what kind of cultural shift that led to. Maybe some of that will come out in our conversation today. You're also certified in psychometrics and the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team model. Um, can you walk me through a little bit about that certification and a little bit about your background?
Yeah, I would say we've really instituted incorporating DISC and the Wiley concepts and practice and methodologies within Certinia, and that has looked like getting our employees from day one into kind of the DISC thought process and using that as a tool to help create better bonds, relationships, build better communication, so on and so forth, and then trying to kind of build that into the practices that we do around communication and collaboration at every level of our organization. So the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team for our senior leadership, the work of leaders to help bridge that gap of communication from senior leadership through to all of our employees and cross-functionally as well. And I think that leads to a lot of the programs that I've done in the past around thinking around how do we how do we communicate with each other? How do we build connection with each other? And then really solidifying it in the thought process, the methodology of DISC, and what our style preferences are, and how we can kind of move beyond that or help each other with those different areas and those connection points has been um, really, really cool, really satisfying to see over the last year for sure.
I can only imagine that people who are viewing this podcast or listening to us on Apple Podcast or Spotify are going to be super interested in knowing more about how you've accomplished that. I'm excited to dig in. Before we get into the actual details, you've delivered three major initiatives this year, including the Senior Leadership Summit, the Emerging Talent Advisory Board, also known as ETAB, and a structured mentorship program. Let's jump into these a little bit, starting with the Senior Leadership Summit. Can you walk me through this a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with a high level goal with all of our programs this year. Was our goals were kind of twofold, primarily based on our engagement survey feedback, but also
Mm,
with that lens of we have a newer leadership team. We're kind of doing some change management. How do we get people to connect with each other again? So the first area of our goals was really thinking about our employees getting more exposure to our leadership, and really thinking about how we can create that connection, get people to understand where they're coming from, where we're going, that sort of thing. And then the second goal was really thinking about um, how we stand up a internal mobility structure where we
mm,
build talent development from within, and we really think about how we create different areas for people to develop their skills with the resources and the programs that we have available or that we can put in place for everyone. So ultimately focusing on our engagement overall, right? Creating that motivation, that productivity, that engagement with each other, and the work in the business and that sort of thing. So the senior leadership series and our summit there was a product of our senior leaderships, who we call our senior directors, our VPs, really having a chance to connect with our executive leadership and tune in to not just what their subject matter expertise is, right? We get to that point as a senior leader to think about how well I do my job in my vertical. But a lot of the time we have a gap in leveling out of where our subject matter expertise is and thinking about the cross functional. How does my stuff impact their stuff? But then also,
mm,
how do we think about the business as a whole? How do I help support the overall business objective, the overall business strategy? And so the senior leadership workshops and summit that we try to do there were addressing those areas in particular. So
mhm,
that started with actually a few virtual workshops where we instituted or incorporated the work of leaders. So
mhm,
thinking about what is your vision for your team, and then how does it apply, or how do we think about it from an overall company perspective?
mhm,
What's the alignment? And this was the big area for us, which was how do we build that cross-functional alignment so that everybody is rowing in the same direction? Everybody understands what we're doing, why, and how we're going to go do that. And then the execution of getting it done, the accountability of what we're trying to do, seeing how it results, and how do we continue to improve upon it. So those three areas were a huge, big part of that senior leadership series.
and I love that. I love the connection here to work of leaders. And again, just to sort of model it out for people who aren't familiar, work of leaders really focuses on vision, alignment, and execution. And what I love about that particular program is it starts with an assessment. What is your current state from that operational modeling of vision, alignment, and execution? And I want to share, this is a little bit humorous to me. When we do those assessments in organizations, we find that most organizations are good at two of those three things, but they don't know that they're not good at the third one. And so when we do the assessment and they see how they're scoring, and maybe they're really good at visioning, and then they're super excited and positive in the alignment phase, and then they miss an execution and they can't quite figure out why, we get to show them the data that shows them what the root cause of those issues are. So I love diving deep into that, and I'm really pleased that you're using that model, and it sounds like it's working well for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as an organization, our organization as a whole, our senior leadership was really great at that visioning of the big, the bold, the adventurous. And then we just started to peter a little bit out because we got so excited about the vision of where we're headed, what we can do, and all the possibilities, but then getting that alignment to all of the different functions that may impact it, or
Mm.
the long-term effects of some of these things, and then actually getting it done and seeing it through. Uh, it was really helpful to be able to have we'll say a name, to put a name to that face, right?
Uh,
Seeing it as a part of our culture over the last several years. Why do we fall down at this point?
mhm.
Why do we have these roadblocks when we shouldn't have these roadblocks? And seeing it within the concept of the work of leaders was really helpful to have that aha moment for a lot of our senior leaders as we were going through these
Mhm.
workshops on each of these different areas.
Brilliant, brilliant. The alignment phase, the middle of the 3 disciplines in work of leaders is critical, I think, in every organization, but it's significantly harder to operationalize successfully, especially as the organization grows in size and then becomes more matrixed. Alignment becomes one of the largest challenges. In fact, you know, ideas are almost never in short supply. So the visioning side of it is something, especially at the executive level, most teams do well. But if you can't get the alignment, it doesn't really matter how good your idea is. It's just not going to survive or be successful. So, bravo to you for using that tool set to be able to see that that was an improvement gap, maybe a critical success factor
Yeah,
in your organization. What sort of experience did the people have? What were you hearing from the participants in that
yeah.
summit?
Well, so yeah, what we tried to do ahead of the on-site in-person summit was have a couple of virtual workshops where we tried to keep the theme of here's your professional development, because that was, everyone wants to see like their own selves being developed as well as kind of putting it into practice with the business. But we talked
Mm.
about each of the different modules, and then we took the time in these workshops to find an actual company problem and put those learnings immediately to work.
Oh, I love that. I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah. So it
It,
was
it takes it out of theoretical and conceptual, and it makes it much more, I think, not only meaningful, but it has a purpose and a mission around it too. That's phenomenal, Lauren.
yeah.
Well done.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really great. And that's where, for my own self, it was really good to be able to partner with our executive team on really finding those problem gaps that they're seeing with our senior leadership group and trying to bridge it together. So they had an invested interest in having these conversations and being a part of the conversation of building skill sets, thinking more strategically and more
Mhm.
cross-functionally as well, and seeing where they can help support their own teams and organizations, reinforcing all of that. So
Mhm.
that was those virtual workshops are really great to set the scene. And then we did 2.5 days, 2 days of on-site work around the work of leaders, execution, our strategy, and our go forward plan for the next year or two. And the feedback there was absolutely phenomenal. I think every single person there felt more connected to what we were trying to do as an organization, the
Mhm.
strategy, the business objectives, how they fit personally, but then also how their organization can help others throughout
Oh,
that time.
wow.
So it was super impactful. All the feedback I got was, can we do this longer? Can this be longer next time? Can we do even more of this at all possible? So that was fantastic to really hear.
That is fantastic. I'm sitting here thinking, gosh, if I'm a director level or above, looking for a great company to align with, it sounds like you've put a really great foundation where leaders can succeed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and it's an ongoing practice, right? This is
Mhm.
still new to the team, and every company has alignment issues, as you've mentioned. But I think it's a really great foundational conversation and program that we've put in place to help people really build on that and connect their organizations, their teams to what the objectives are coming up this next year, and that they can hook into to build that sense of community, connection, engagement, motivation, so on and so forth.
Phenomenal, Lauren. Really, really well done. This feels to me like one of those initiatives that's going to continue to pay dividends over time. Very foundational and maybe even transformational in the work. But it feels like one of those initiatives that is going to continue to generate positivity and really great outcomes in the organization. Do you have that same sense?
Absolutely. And I've already had leaders who, one, you know, from the very beginning, were like, this is a revelation, to put it into easy words to understand and then to convey to others what we're trying to do and how we're going to do it has been really helpful. And then I've also had a lot of leaders wanting to bring it down to their next level of management and take those
Mhm.
core concepts that, you know, maybe they're not going to be hooking into the high level company vision, but how do they build their own visions for their teams to build that alignment, that execution cross functionally within their business unit, or cross functionally in those different areas of our product. So, you know, that sort of thing, where they want to just continue to evangelize the message as much as possible.
Oh my gosh, I love everything about that. One of my personal criteria for a successful initiative, especially at the leadership level, is always when they sort of voluntarily take the modeling, the tool set, whatever input it is that we're giving them, and they begin to push that down in the organization because they know that it maximizes their leadership efficacy. I think that's a home run every time. Gosh,
Mhm.
congratulations. Really
Thanks.
well
Yeah,
done.
and the disc stuff has also disc has played a great part in that as well, because the worker leaders assessment has that disc aspect to it. But we keep going back to our original disc trainings that we've been doing over the last 2 years, around thinking around, how do you build better relationships? How do you build better communication by understanding where someone may have some natural tendencies, where they may need some stretch, what might be a trigger for someone, and how you say it or how you approach it, and how you can approach it in a different way that will be more amenable to someone. So we try to bring that into that discussion too, when we're thinking about what does that communication and that vision and alignment look like. How do you start to continue to tailor your message and reinforce your message based on the style, preferences, tendencies that people may be showing up with.
Yeah, that's a home run for me. I often think of DISC, the psychometric, as the way to decode the human code.
Mm,
When we understand somebody's DISC style, we understand their communication preferences and priorities. We understand the types of information that they need to be able to make good decisions. We understand deeply interpersonal dynamics. And from a leadership standpoint, when you're able to have that decoding ring, if you will, for your team, it really becomes very prescriptive in how am I supposed to show up to be able to lead my team to be the most effective as a leader. And I literally cannot think of anything else, any other tool or strategy or theory that is more effective at creating, using your words, that sense of connectedness, but also the ability to see and then know what your team needs for them to be effective, for them to be engaged, for them to be motivated.
mhm.
Yeah, I love DISC and love that you're using it across the whole organization. Let's pivot over to the Emerging Talent Advisory Board, also known as ETAB. That was the second major initiative that you had this year. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, this was a suggestion initially from our new CEO, who really wanted to have a sounding board from our employees around areas that he wanted to have discussions about, problems he may be seeing, cultural discussions, what have you. Um, and so we tried to put it into a program that had both that aspect for him to get more communication and discussion going with earlier talent within our organization, but also provide some really awesome exposure and education, overall development for our early talent, to help create that internal mobility, that internal skill development that can be learned from all of the great skill sets we already have here at
Mm,
Certinia.
mhm,
So what that looked like was essentially, we'll say high level, it's a hypo program. It's a high potential program where we
mhm.
found some really great up and coming talent within across globally our entire company, and we brought them in to do some professional development. So learning executive presence, presentation skills,
Uh,
informal leadership training, so things like that, coaching, learning from our executive team, getting dedicated time with our executive team, and then being able to turn around and use their skill sets that they're so great at already to problem solve on some
Huh.
within the organization. So we had them focus this year on recognition. How do we build recognition that works for the entire company? And then how do we drive community and connectedness across our company when we are essentially a remote first organization? We have
Mhm.
people in all of our states here in the US. We have people in multiple countries in EMEA and APAC. So, how do we create that sense of connection across all of our different orgs and locations? So, it was, again, it was kind of a reciprocal relationship that was being built within this program, which was really, really great.
You know what what's coming up for me on this, Lauren? This idea that you are a remote first company, but not just remote first, you're remote first on a global basis. And I know so many companies are really wrestling with that. In fact, we're hearing a lot of companies coming back saying, we're going to return to office, and that's the policy. And the reason we keep hearing that so significantly is because they can't figure out how to get remote first right.
Mhm.
And it sounds like you are getting it right.
I mean, I think it's a constant evolution. I think we're still working on that, and that's part of that conversation. I think we're making some really great strides, and having our employees be the ones who have that input to say, "Here's what we need to do to create that sense of connection,"
Mhm.
regardless of whether you're in an office, because we do have offices. But whether you're whether in office or remote or you're hybrid, how do you make sure that people feel like they understand where we're going as a company, feel connected to the people in their team or cross
Mm.
functionally, and be able to have that smile on your face coming to a virtual meeting is what we're trying to strive for. So yeah.
I love it. What are you hearing from people who've been the benefactors? Maybe that's not right. The beneficiaries of this program. What sort of feedback are you getting?
So our our program is 6 months. We're just over halfway through it. And we've had some virtual workshops. And then we were lucky enough to be able to have a in-person workshop for our ETAB folks during our senior leadership summit. So not only did they get exposure from our executive team, they got exposure to all of our senior leadership. And I would say the feedback we got so far has, I would say, love is not a strong enough word for how much they have enjoyed this program. Getting the exposure to be able to have coaches from our senior leadership team, they participated in activities from our summit. So they were able to have fun and get to know people in a more informal way than just a presentation, a town hall, or something like that. We've done AMAs, we've done panel discussions with our executives, and all of them have said this is the best experience I've had in my entire career.
Wow.
Every single one of them, when chosen, just to say, "Hey, what's the highlight of my career?" Even before we really got into the workshops, being a part of ETAB is one of the highlights of their career. To be able to have that exposure and work on something as meaningful as this
Wow.
with our company has been fantastic.
Wow. I'm a little bit stunned by that. It's, in this crazy world, um, and the pace and the velocity and the volume that's going on in corporate America today. To hear that kind of feedback from the employee base to me seems like an extraordinary win.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was nervous about it because we're asking employees to take time out of their regular days, their day to days, and we hear a lot of the time in learning and development. You hear like there's a time constraint. I don't have time to do professional development or personal development or all this learning and development because I'm doing my job. I got to do my
Yeah.
job, right?
Yeah.
And so being able to say, hey, look, this is an investment in you. You're getting all of this exposure. You get to impact the company in this way. And a lot for the time that we're not going to ask you to do a whole bunch of work outside of these specific times that we're asking you to do this, but you're going to get a lot out of it. I think we've really found a good balance to provide development and dedicated time for folks to get to know each other again, create that connection, learn, and grow. And yeah, I've been so happy with how it's been turning out so far, and I'm super excited because we'll have at our sales kickoff next year, they will do their final presentations of what
Oh,
they've come to a solution to, and so it'll be really great to see that culminate.
wow. Good luck.
Yeah.
What's coming up for me based on what you've just said is this concept of working in your business versus working on your business.
Mm,
Working in your business is doing the job that you were hired to do. But working on your business is really a business builder configuration and focus. And you said something there that was absolutely critical to getting that component right, which is your executive team has to not only sort of, bless the need for it and then create the time and the cycles for it, but there also has to be a bit of an expectation that, especially at the senior level, that there is going to be some building of the business or, working on the business.
mhm.
I think that's an area that a lot of organizations struggle with is, they're so busy all the time. How do we find the time? Well, you have to make the time to build your business if you want to have any sort of resiliency in the marketplace and the market is moving quickly. And if you want to have some nimbleness there to be able to react and maybe even get ahead of those for a competitive advantage, you've got to be able to work on your business too and find that balance. Again, it sounds like you're getting that right.
Yeah, and I think what I love about this program is that we're doing it early on for our employees. I think
Mhm.
you get so far in your career by just, again, doing your job and doing your job well, that sometimes you miss the, I always forget this, how this says, the miss the trees for the forest, forest for the trees,
Mm.
where you
Yeah.
kind of you sucked into it, right? And
Mhm.
how do we level people out sooner in their careers to think strategically and think about their global impact or their company impact as opposed to just their own job and what's in it for me? I think doing something like this where they get that exposure, they can think about it on a global company scale sooner in their careers will
Yeah.
impact more successful aspects of all of their careers in the future. So,
Mhm. That makes me think, especially if you're helping them shift into that more, organizational level strategic thinking, thinking about future state
yeah.
automatically leads to better decision making.
Mhm.
And it probably leads to better engagement because they're able to think through and then strategize, how do I want to manage my career? How do I want to create value for the organization? And what a great way to win.
Absolutely, 100%. Yes. Yeah.
Phenomenal. You mentioned a third initiative, and I think it's the mentorship program.
Mhm.
That's a little different from ETAB. Let's talk
It is
about.
a little bit different. Yeah, this one, so as you can tell from these two other programs, we've kind of addressed the spectrums of our employees. We've got some early talent, we've got our senior leadership, and they're on the ends of that talent development spectrum, I would say. Mentorship was really to help start thinking about creating talent development connections and relationships across our entire company.
Mhm,
So I think a lot of organizations, you get feedback in your engagement survey around, I want mentorship, I want someone to develop me, I want all of this great stuff, right? And we didn't have the capacity in our HR team to be able to do a mentorship program up until now, across the entire company. We've done starts and stops of pilots and hypo groups and things like that. But this one, we really wanted to dedicate for the entire organization to find anyone. If you were interested in a mentor, you could find a mentor within the company.
mhm.
And so
This is at any level?
at any level. So we really
Right.
tried to address that, again, the connection across all of our different levels and experiences globally as well, and then be able to provide opportunities for people to learn from each other and develop their skill sets. So this program is a 6-month program. We went through a process of finding a tool to make sure that this was scalable as well, so that it wasn't just me in a spreadsheet, trying to match people and that sort of thing,
Yeah.
but really trying to think about how do we create ongoing engagement with communication and topics for people to discuss, that they're focusing on an actual goal or OKR, SMART goal, to kind of think about how they want to develop over the next 6 months, and then provide resources for both mentees and mentors on how to be that great coach,
Mhm,
and think about their experiences. So, having the tool has been really, really helpful. We launched our partnerships in November. We offset it from our performance management schedule so that
mhm,
we have these resources as you're having a performance conversation and setting goals, that you now have the ability to create an individual development plan, go to a mentorship program, and get those resources real time to have those conversations and develop your skills. So people really like that these things are coming into play right when they're looking for it during a time where they're having
Mm.
conversations around their development and their performance. So that's been really, really good feedback there. And then overall, again, this was a pilot for the program across the company. We weren't sure how many people were going to make the time, back to that earlier conversation, make the time to participate. We
Mhm.
had nearly double the amount of anticipated participation in this. So we were so excited to have all different levels of people who enrolled in the program, who were excited to take on 1, 2, even 3 mentees
Wow.
as a mentor, and really think about what are those goals that they're looking to develop over the next 6 months. So
Wow. One mentee is a lot. 3 is crazy.
yeah, yeah,
That's really impressive.
yeah.
I do some mentoring at my grad school, on a fairly regular basis. I usually take on 1 per semester.
Mm,
And of course, it's all volunteer, but to do it right takes some time and some energy and some investment and some focus. And wow, to have more than one is really impressive.
absolutely. I think our tools from the tool that we're using and the resources from that have been really helpful to get mentors up and running. I do find that, and this is something that I want to iterate on for our next cycle, is I'm kind of coaching the coaches a little bit in
Right.
how they address things, which is great. I love being able to have that connection point with these mentors and how they're
Mhm.
thinking about it. I'm just trying to think about how do we make this scalable longer term, as well, in the event that we launch a second mentorship program for some of our ERGs, or a special interest groups of some sort. So it's been really great for me to learn on what's working so far, what people really love about the program, and the tool and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Mhm. Lauren, I'm so impressed with the work that you've done, the thought that you've put into it, the strategy that you've applied, and then ultimately on the execution component as well, because it sounds like you've got 3 major initiatives. The execution was what I would describe as flawless because it is super effective in the organization. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm so happy about how things have turned out over the last year, and excited to see how they kind of continue to evolve too as we build more into it and really kind of find that nuance that helps people really hook into learning. So
Well done. Well
yeah,
done.
yeah.
One of the questions I have a couple of questions that I like to ask my guests, that are not necessarily role related. And so the first one that I want to ask you is, what advice would you give to somebody who's maybe picking HR or learning and development as a field? What advice would you give them coming up?
I think what's been really successful for me is not to we'll say, pick a major of an HR specialty too early in your career.
Huh.
I have loved being able to sit in different desks, as you may call it. So I have been able to do HR operations. I've been able to do total rewards,
Mhm.
business partnership, learning and development. And I think that's been really helpful in understanding the overall impact that HR has on an organization, and being able to connect the dots and link the overall strategy of HR with the overall strategy of the company. I think if
Mhm.
you uh, kind of stick in your lane too much, you may miss how those things connect a little bit and miss that opportunity to understand the other parts of the business. So really being able to try different things within HR and really get a sense of what you don't like and what you do like, but also getting a sense of how things all connect together and how you can kind of use those different skills to help this different function be better, I think has
Mhm.
been a really great thing to do as a HR professional.
I love that advice. Get a tour of duty in a variety of HR disciplines before you decide which one you want to specialize in.
Mhm,
The way that you described it from that piece of advice is that you'll have a better sense of how HR as a function works in an organization, which makes it easier to connect to the business and its goals, and from an enablement standpoint, how HR can help. I think the other, from my perspective, the wisdom in that advice is go figure out where your passion is too. Don't
Mhm.
don't necessarily make that decision too soon. In other words, go explore the different options in HR and then find out which one speaks to you before you decide where you want to go. And I think that's probably going to contribute to success as well.
Yeah, raise your hand is like probably the biggest biggest part of that too is whenever there's something that's interesting to you, raise your hand and say, "Hey, can I work on that?" Or "Hey,
Mm,
can I shadow that?" Because what's the worst that's going to happen if someone says, "Actually, we don't need we don't have that right now for you," or we'll keep you in mind for it for the next time round.
mhm,
What's wrong with that, right? So
mhm.
raise your hand for sure.
Love it. In that same vein of giving advice, in that previous example, we talked about people who are up and coming. What about people who would maybe be in your peer group, director, senior director level? What what have you learned that you'd like to share with everyone, or something that you think everybody should know?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think there are I think we're doing a lot better at this now, we'll say post-pandemic than we have been previously, which is the setting of boundaries, finding the balance, taking care of your whole self.
Mm,
Um, I think a lot of the time we HR has become kind of the everything, the coach, the therapist, the
right.
solver of all problems, the fixer of all all issues, that sort of thing. And I think that can create a lot of stress. And I think that was me if I was going to give myself advice as well early on. Is there's a balance in taking on too much and thinking everything is going to be urgent and everything has to be done, with also thinking about the long term of like how is that going to affect you, how are you going to make sure that you can find a balance for taking care of yourself, whether that's mentally or physically, and eating right, to taking some time to decompress, things like that. I'd say like there's it's a continual work in progress to make sure that you're setting some good healthy boundaries for yourself and taking the time to do your job and do your job well, but also take some time and do yourself well.
Huh, oh my gosh. That is, it's profound in some ways. Heal thyself first. I love the reference to, you're a coach and you're also a therapist, and I think HR does play that role. What comes up for me as you describe that is this idea of, model the behavior that
Mhm,
you want to see the leaders that you're serving in organizations, model the behavior that you want them to have. And so show that you're making yourself a priority. The second thing that came up for me is absolutely right on. I have to tell you, every time I'm working with an executive that is really sort of over the edge, they've stretched too far. Rather than getting into the organizational dynamics that cause that, we often go to, let's talk about your diet. Let's talk about the exercise you're getting or not getting. Let's talk about the quality of sleep and are you getting enough of it?
mhm,
And we really start working on those basics. The framing for me is very much like, treat yourself like an athlete.
mm, mhm,
Treat yourself like an athlete. Recover, go do the intense hard work, stress your body, stress your mind, but then go through the process of making sure that you're getting the right kind of recovery in place.
yeah,
And I cannot tell you the number of executives that we've coached that have, first of all, they knew it. We're not telling them something they don't already know,
yeah,
but we're often giving them the impetus to say, you know what, you're right. I do actually have to make some changes here. I've got to rebalance myself before I can expect myself to go then be, in balance with my organization. So what a brilliant piece of advice there, Lauren.
yeah, absolutely.
And then my last question for you today, and please have fun with this if you can. What was the best piece of advice that you received that you didn't take but wish you had?
Oh, so I'll say I'm an introvert. I tend to be happy with a rainy day, reading a book, just curled up with a blanket, that sort of thing. And it's hard, and it's been a hard journey for me to be someone that is more, we'll say like more to come out of my comfort zone, more to like make that first step. Again, DISC, I'm a SC, so steadiness and conscientiousness is the big part for me. Piece of feedback that I got early on that it took me a really long time to actually take. So I didn't do it for a while, and then it just
Mhm.
finally bit that bullet was, um, just reach out. Just reach out to the
Ah,
person and say hi and ask for that 5-minute meeting, that 15-minute coffee chat, whatever. What's the worst that could happen? They, 8 out of 10 times, it was a fantastic conversation. I learned a lot. I was
yeah,
able to make a connection. There was 1 or 2 times where it was like, well, I guess I wasn't on my game, or that person was maybe should have had some more balance and said, let's hold off on the conversation for a little bit. So it's okay. But it took me a while to be like, oh, don't feel so nervous about reaching out and having this conversation with someone, or reaching out and saying hi and creating a new connection. Um, do it, do it, do it, do it, and it'll be fine. And you get more practice, and then it makes it even easier. And so, so yeah, that's
yeah. Awesome. I love bringing in your introvertedness into the conversation, and your SC style in particular. Every once in a while, we have some clients that we end up coaching. It's like, don't send the email, make the phone call. Right. Don't send the email. Go knock on the door and have a conversation.
yeah,
And to your point, I think the more we do that and sort of step out of our comfort zone as introverts, stepping out of that zone just makes us more effective.
yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, I think from doing that now, people are surprised that I'm introverted, and are surprised that I am an SC, because it's one of those things where I'm like, I know what I need to do to create that connection, and I know that I'm going to benefit from that so much more than just keeping to myself. So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Brilliant. Lauren, I have thoroughly, I mean, thoroughly enjoyed this conversation today. Thank you so much for joining us on iBridge Leadership Stories. I can't wait to see what you do next in your career.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I love this conversation. Anytime you want to talk more about DISC and fun, wily practices, I'm happy to be here. So thank you so
Awesome.
much. Yeah.
Thank you, Lauren. We'll talk soon.
Okay.